Hi everyone, welcome to our show. My name is Curtis Brooks and this is Brand Talk with Curtis. This is the launching of our very first show here on our channel that is Curtis Brooks Media Productions. Again, the show name is Brand Talk with Curtis and my name is Curtis, your wonderful host here. Today we are going to be talking about brand language. Does your business have a brand language? What in fact is brand language? We'll be answering those questions, and finally I'll be giving you a couple of tips and pointers on how to turn bad brand language, that's always a tongue twister there, to turn bad brand language into effective communication for your customers. So that being said, we are going to get involved into that. Make sure my stream here is set here and I'm able to see myself here on my other iPad here, so bear with me for a moment here. How is everyone doing today? Hopefully having an awesome day. We're going to be getting right involved into it. There we go. There I am. All right, awesome, perfect. All right, once again, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Curtis Brooks and this is Brand Talk with Curtis, the launching of our very first show here on our channel here, our Facebook channel that is that is Curtis Brooks Media Productions here on Facebook. I have been doing live stream for the past 7 years, actually probably a little longer than that. I remember with Livestream, they came out with their platform, and I had been a part of that for some time or just messing around with that. I purchased some equipment, as you can see, or you can see, barely see, I guess, a little equipment, and to get myself started with that. So right now, currently, I am doing live streaming. I create promo commercials or videos, commercials for content creators, for businesses, professionals as well. But today we're talking about brand language. I chose this subject because a lot of people that I'm dealing with, or potential clients that I'm dealing with, there is a problem for them to communicate. And I thought the topic or the discussion of brand language would be absolutely perfect, and because one of the tags that I use is visual branding. And I said, well, wait a minute though, there's got to be more to this, because if there's a rhythm to something, not everyone pays attention to it, but nevertheless, it doesn't mean that there's not a rhythm to it. So that being said, it had, for me in my mind, I'm thinking it had to be something that people were communicating. What are people communicating? What are they saying? What's different from your brand and my brand? Why does another brand stand out over another? So for me, there had to be a language and that's my thinking. That's my kind of weird thinking sometimes. There had to be a language that people were speaking. And my question was, what is that language? What are kind of weird thinking sometimes? What are they saying? And how are they saying it? So that being said, I taken the liberty to dive into some things here on Google, Sir Google, and do a search, and I looked up the word brand language. And this is what I discovered here. Here is the definition of brand language. We'll put it on the screen here. It says, visual brand language is a unique alphabet of design elements such as shape, color, materials, finish, typography, and composition, which directly and subliminally, I have to say that word really quick here and get through that one. Communicate a company's values and personality through compelling imagery and design style. That is a mouthful. And let's go back to me for just a moment here, because again, I want to dive more into that, and we're going to break that apart line by line, because when we understand a language, we can communicate effectively. When we understand what people are saying and how they're saying it and the reason behind it, we can communicate effectively. And then it is our job to make sure that the other person understands. So that being said, I further had taken the liberty to continue my search on Google and doing my homework here. And what am I going to bring up right now? Well, let's take a look. I'm going to take you to my screen here, And my screen is going to give you more of the research I've done. And really, I'm going to actually look at this from a communication perspective. I looked up the word communication, and further, I said, well, there's more to communication. There's a pattern, there's a system, if you will. There are different levels of communicating, obviously. But that being said, I discovered that there was not so much just a system, but there's different levels of communication. And that being said, let's get to that here. And I did mention in regards to the definition, or I read the definition of the visual brand language, and that was derived from Wikipedia here on Google, and you can search it up for yourself. I just looked up the word visual brand language, and there it was under the search there. And again, it was found on Wikipedia under visual brand language. So that was the definition I read for you for your references. References are absolutely important. I think we forget about that. Sometimes we go off and start saying a bunch of different things and we haven't referenced anything. But that being said, this here is, let's see, where was it actually? The 7 elements or major elements of communication, the communication process. All right. So this is what I found on Google. So again, I looked up what are the parts of communication. That was my initial search. And then I came up with a bunch of different searches, but this is where I arrived at and decided to make this part of my presentation here. So that being said, we're looking at the 7 major elements of communication. And again, we're still talking about brand language. And my theory and my idea said, well, wait a minute, let's take this backwards, if you will. Because before there's a brand language, there's a way that we have to understand communication. And when we understand communication, we can further communicate that more effectively. So that being said, here's what we have here. We've got the 7 major elements of communication process. The first one is a sender. The person who intends to convey the message with the intention of passing information and ideas to others is known as the sender of communicator or communicator. Meaning that I am the sender. I have the information, I'm conveying the information, and I'm passing it along to you as the audience, as the individual who's listening. Second, we have the ideas. Again, we're talking about the 7 major elements of communication. Again, there's a process in communication, believe it or not. All right, so there has to be a sender, and there has to be a idea that the sender conveys. And the definition that they're giving here is this is the subject matter of the communication. I mean, this is the idea, what's been formulated, the aha moment, or information through a presentation that's been put together. It could be absolutely anything. So, idea is being communicated by the sender. This is the subject matter of the communication. This may be an opinion, attitude, feelings, views, orders, or suggestions. Again, the sender is conveying their message or their idea. All right, so again, we're still talking about brand language. So we're deciding to take this from a backwards perspective, if you will. And I say backwards because I think we first have to understand communication. That's absolutely essential. So let's look at encoding. Again, our third definition within the 7 parts of this effective communication or the process of communication. We have encoding. And encoding is, since the subject matter of communication is theoretical and tangible, its further passing requires use of certain symbols such as words, actions, or pictures, etc. Conversion of such matter into these symbols is a process of encoding. And I think that's absolutely awesome, the word in itself, because a computer in itself uses an encoder. So if you're streaming video or even audio, the information has to be encoded. You speak the information, the idea, as a sender into the object or into the microphone. The information is then encoded, such as the language that it comes out on the other end through the the algorithm or some kind of pattern, again representing your language, if you will, some kind of symbol or something is happening, converting your speech into a language that is convertible so others can understand it. So fourthly, we have your communication channel. Your communication channel, the person who is interested in communicating has to choose a channel for sending the required information, ideas, etc. This information is transmitted to the receiver, through certain channels which may be either formal or informal. And this is awesome. Again, this is that tape recorder. This is that live stream, Facebook live stream. This is that Periscope. It can absolutely be any kind of device. Again, that is your communication channel. You can write it down. You can make it formal, informal in the letter or over a PA system. Again, your channel of communication. And fifthly, we have the receiver. The receiver is a person who receives the message or for whom the message is meant. Again, you always need a receiver. So if you are communicating something that is important and you don't have a receiver, you are essentially speaking to yourself or preparing those thoughts for later, hopefully. But nevertheless, again, communication needs a receiver. Again, if you want to be understood, you need a receiver. Again, this is 7 parts of the communication process. Again, the receiver is the person who receives the message or for whom the message is meant for. It is the receiver who tries to understand the message in the best possible manner, achieving the desired objectives. So as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, you are the sender of XYZ information, all right? Whatever the information is, you are to have a receiver on the other end to whom you are communicating that information to. And when you are communicating that information to, it's absolutely essential to choose the right communication channel. It's absolutely essential to encode the information that you've received. And it's very interesting because how we encode the information is absolutely essential. How we encode the information. And encoding can be configured to, yes, absolutely computers. Computers use encoders and they also use decoders. You see number 6, we'll get to that in just a few moments here. But a computer uses an encoder, much like when we are communicating in the process of communicating, that information must be encoded, if you will, encoded by the sender. You are the sender. So theoretically, as it says here, the communication that we've gathered in our minds, it becomes tangible. It becomes the objective of what we're communicating. And when we are communicating that information effectively, it becomes that much more important to be able to choose the right tool to communicate that information, meaning the communication channel is absolutely essential. We're still talking about brand language because, again, we first must understand the process of communication. And we're going to really get into the workings of building your brand language and understanding your brand language. So we've already read the definition of brand language, what it entails, what it means to us. Again, and obviously everyone is going to have different meanings here. So I'm reading from my screen. You can't see it, but nevertheless, it says visual brand language is a unique alphabet of design elements such as shape, color, materials, finish, typography, and composition, which directly and subliminally communicate a company's values and personality through compelling imagery and design style. So how much more important is it for us as the sender to have the right idea about our brand or understanding our brand, and not only understanding our brand, but being able to encode that information and choose the right communication channel to forward that information to convey that message. This is awesome. This is awesome, guys. This is absolutely awesome. So again, And as you have chosen the right communication channel, you've got to be able to make sure that the receiver receives the information. We're going to absolutely get into this, so hang tight, guys. So we talked about the receiver being the person who receives the message, and for whom the message is meant for. The receiver who tries to understand the message to the best of their ability, achieving the desired goals, which the sender has shared with the receiver. All right. Now, decoding. A computer has a decoder. All right. So if you're live streaming or Audible, doing a podcast, the computer has to encode the information, and it also has to decode the information. So it works the same way as we are communicating. All right. A person who receives the message or symbol from the computer, from the communicator, tries to convert the same message. Let's put that on the screen here so that we're all looking at the same thing here. Okay. Decoding. Number 6. The person who receives the message or symbol from the communicator tries to convert the message in such a way so that he or she may extract its meaning to his complete understanding. Awesome. That is absolutely awesome. Again, guys, we're going to get into the meat of this. What time are we looking at here? About 15 minutes into our show here. Awesome. Awesome, absolutely awesome. I am paying the production crew and the host, so pardon me for that. But nevertheless, someone has to do it. That being said, definition of decoder or decoding. When we are communicating, it works the same way with our brand language. Again, we're going to dive into that. So as a person or who is receiving the information, they've received the information, now they have to decode the information. Again, the same thing happens with a computer when you are live streaming, such as I'm live streaming now, and when you are sending audio, if you're doing a podcast, okay? The person being the receiver, being you on the other end, receiving the information, you have to decode that information. You have to decode that information, and hopefully you're decoding that information in a manner that it is received in the fashion that it is intended for its purpose. Meaning that for what I'm sharing with you, you're receiving it in the same way. You've decoded it and received that information that I've shared with you. You've coded it in a manner and you're receiving the same message. So you are able to understand what I'm sharing with you because you have decoded that information, or the information me as the sender sharing with you. You've decoded that information in the exact fashion, or pretty close to it. I don't know if anything is ever exact with communication, but nevertheless, or to the best of your understanding, I should say. Now, our last one, and we're going to dive into the meat of what we are talking about, which is brand language. So, number 7. Again, we've been talking about the 7 components. Let's go back to the top here. We've been talking about the 7 major elements of the communication process. We're still talking about brand language. What is your brand language? Again, I've decided to kind of look at this from a different perspective, or at least from the communication perspective, if you will, to get a better or clearer idea of brand language. And then you will be able to answer the question, does your business have a brand language? Does your business have a brand language? After the information I've shared with you, hopefully you're gathering that your business, in fact, does have a brand language. Finally, number 7, feedback. Feedback is the process. Let's put that on the screen here so we're all on the same page here. All right, number 7. Feedback is the process of ensuring that the receiver has received the message and understood in the same sense as the sender meant it. All right? That's feedback. That's feedback. That is precisely, ladies and gentlemen, the reason why many companies do surveys. They want you to do a survey. If you don't mind, could you do a survey? If you don't mind, could you answer a few questions about your service? If you don't mind, could you answer a few questions about XYZ? Surveys, surveys, surveys. Surveys provide feedback. And so many brands or organizations, companies, small businesses, doesn't matter. Even as parents, we sometimes ask your kid, now, what did I say to you? Now, help me understand or share, give me some feedback. We maybe not in those precise words, but you get the point. The point is that feedback is absolutely essential. So brands, large brands, small brands, companies, mom and pop, doesn't matter. Feedback is absolutely essential to your communication process. And as we move forward, it's absolutely essential to your brand language. So that is the reason why most companies are asking for surveys, because they want the feedback. So they are practicing number 7 of this communication process. They are the sender. They have sent the information out. That information, as we mentioned earlier, your brand language, your visual brand language and brand language. They have sent the information out here. I'm going to put it on the screen here. They have sent the information out in the way of their design, the way of their design is shaped, the color, the materials, the makeup of their design, is the composition of their design. They have communicated their design, such as a commercial. They have shared all kinds of information. Perhaps they're doing a rebranding. So they are the sender. And they share the idea. Again, this is the second step of the process of communicating. Again, we're still talking about brand language. What is brand language? What is your brand language? And in order to figure out your brand language or to understand your brand language, you have to, first understand that there is a process with communicating. All right? You have to recognize that you are the sender. Anytime you communicate something, whether it's spoken, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, folding of the hands or eye roll or a smile or anything, a disconnect, maybe something you don't understand, and the way your disposition might be for that moment. People are always looking. They're always looking. They're always checking us out. And whether it be you individually, your brand, your customers, your employees, down to the uniform, down to the logo. Again, we're talking about building brand language. Recognize anytime that you put any information out there, whether you communicate it through a podcast, or whether you communicate it through a rebranding campaign that you're doing, it is essential. It becomes essential that you recognize that you are communicating, whether it's verbally or non-verbally. Again, anytime that you are putting material, information out there, you are communicating as a sender, okay? You're communicating an idea. That idea has to be encoded. And I think this is the interesting part, because I think that is what takes place a lot of times. The information, as entrepreneurs, we have a lot of great ideas. In fact, we are the sender. Again, this is the first step within the communication process. We are the sender. Hey, Joel, thanks for joining, man. I appreciate it. I'm sorry, got so caught up into my conversation. I got another iPad here, so thanks for joining, man. I appreciate it. So we are the sender as we are communicating our idea. And as business owners, entrepreneurs, we have to, again, understand the communication process. And when you understand the communication process, that there are 7 steps in this process, and perhaps there are steps left out. And maybe that's where many of us have gone wrong, is because we're leaving the steps out. Again, each of these steps, as maybe insignificant as they may be to you, they're absolutely essential and important. This is what the large brands do. And I think if we understand why a company such as McDonald's or Facebook or some of the other large companies, social media platforms, large businesses, corporations, why they want feedback, because feedback represents the number 7. Hey, Curtis. Hey, I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Number 7 represents the 7th step or 7th level within this process. And the feedback is absolutely important. All of these steps are absolutely important because, again, anytime you or I put any information out there, we have to recognize that we are the sender. You have to recognize and understand where you are positioned within the process. And I'll say it again, I think a lot of times we get caught up in the third step of this here. And I'll put that on the screen here so that we're all on the same page. And again, we're getting caught up in that third stage of the process, and that is called the encoding process. Again, we recognizing that we are the sender in this process. We have a great idea. We have an opinion, and we're strong about this idea that we want to share. We have creativity. We're creative. And we want to share. But then we also have to recognize that, again, I believe the third part of this is where a lot of us get caught up in. The encoding piece of it. And the encoding is interesting because the encoding is very interesting. And I'm going to just take it here for a moment because encoding has not only to do with how you convey the message, it has to do how, with as business owners, how we receive the information. How when you put those objects or those ingredients into that blender, it's the order that you put those ingredients into that mix or to that blender, that mixer. That order is important. And when we don't understand or encode the message wrong, it's going to be delivered wrong. And therefore, if it's delivered wrong, and I say wrong with the intent that the feedback is important. Again, I'm saying wrong purposely because a lot of times we say, oh, there's no right or wrong way to do things. In fact, there is, because in the end, as we are communicating our brand language, there has to be a consensus on what we are sharing in regards to, yes, I'm the sender and you as the receiver have received the information in the fashion that I'm communicating the information, meaning that you understand the information precisely in a fashion that I've shared it. You get it. We can move forward now. We can build something together, create a relationship now. And if the encoding is not correct, rest assured the decoding is going to be off-kiltered. It's going to be whack. It's going to be, again, a misunderstanding, a disconnect, if you will. So again, it is absolutely important for us to be able to encode the information. The encoding is I mean, wow. It's if I could say, I think all parts of this communication process are important, but I think the encoding piece, and I'm going on a limb here, I think the encoding piece, I want to say one thing, but then I also want to say, oh, if I could pick two things, but I'll take a stand and pick one thing. And I would say the encoding piece is the biggest thing. That's just my opinion. What do you think, Joe, if you're still there? I would say the encoding piece is the bigger piece of the communication process. Not necessarily more important, but again, the encoding piece of it is that it comes from not just how we receive the information at that moment, but it comes from years, even years before that. Because the encoding is the process from which we have received all information up to the point. All the information that we've put into this mixer of life, if you will, that blender or whatever the case may be. The encoding process begins well before we've started a business. And the encoding process has to be encoded in a way where people are understanding us or at least we're understanding, and then eventually, if we can understand it, we can hopefully choose the the proper communication channel to deliver that information. And here's the wonderful thing about the communication process, and again, we're talking about brand language, is that at each step of this communication process, we have to be on guard, if you will. We have to make sure that we've essentially got the right mannerism. Our disposition says a lot when we're talking. Some of the things that we've gone through throughout the course of the day say a lot in regards to when we deliver that message. So I'm going to share some other things with you. And now we're going to, what time we got here? Oh wow, 30 minutes go really quick when you're having fun here. Wow. Okay, so now lastly, I want to talk about more about obviously our brand language here. So now I want to share this with you, show you my screen here. We're going to talk about your brand language. We're going to continue the discussion and how your brand language has a lot to do with your colors that you choose. How awesome is that? Your brand language is the emotion behind your communication. Your brand language is your attitude. Your brand language is your optimism. It's your excitement. It's your creativity. It's your trust. It's your peace, the place from which that information comes from. It's your balance. It's all of these things, and the marketers have it down to a science, or science has it down to a science, if you will. And some of these brands, I'm sure that many of you recognize these brands. And further getting into the brand language piece of it, is that there's a reason why they choose the colors that they choose. Because with each of the colors, it represents their brand language. It represents their attitude. It represents their persuasiveness in their speech, even though they're not speaking. The unspoken language. It represents their logo. The yellow represents the optimistic, being optimistic, the optimism about their company. Doesn't matter. They put their logo on something. It says here, it represents optimism, clarity, and warmth. And what companies do we see here on the chart that represent this clarity and this warmth? Do we recognize anything there? Do we recognize companies that are friendly? Again, guys, this is done for a reason, and that was the exact reason why I decided to look at this from a communications perspective, because it's not any different. The way that we communicate in a spoken language, as much as we are communicating in a non-spoken language, non-verbally, it is the same message that is conveyed through our brand language. Down to your logo, down to the alphabet, the typography, the makeup or the composition of your logo, the colors that you choose. It has everything to do with your brand language. It has everything to do with your attitude. We see balance represents a kind of a gray color. Balance, calm. What colors do we associate, what companies do we associate with a calmness? Do you recognize any companies there? I do. I recognize Apple, recognize Honda, recognize Nike, and several other companies that are there. Again, the brand language. So hopefully, as we're wrapping it up here, hopefully you understand that as we are building our brand, our business, our multi-level organization, that it is absolutely essential that we stop, recognize our position within the communication process. Yes, we're still talking about, or I'm still talking about, brand language, because it becomes absolutely essential first, before we can even understand brand language, that we understand the communication process, that we understand the 7 parts of communication, that we understand what process or what part of the process is our communication, our level of communication in, or where are we at within the process of our communication. So if you have just put together a new logo, or you're in the process of rebranding your organization, it's essential that you recognize that you, as that company owner, CEO, that you are the sender. You are sharing an idea. You are encoding that information as it relates to your attitude. Again, the colors that you choose, the opinions that you may have, your feelings, your views, and your suggestions. So you're choosing the colors or the alphabet, the font style, if you will, as it relates to how what your ideas are. And as you are encoding the information, I think I got twisted there, you're giving your views. This information now becomes tangible to you. It becomes your theory, your idea. And now you're at a place where you can share this information. And it's important that you choose the proper channel to share your information. Why would you want to share your information on a social platform where it's kind of defunct, if you will? You don't have many followers. And obviously you can build followers, but again, the feedback is important. The feedback is important. So as we depart here, I want to share one more thing here. And I'm going to give you my screen here, share my screen one more time here. This is another Google search of my process of doing my research here. These are the fonts here on the screen you're looking at. Again, there are literally hundreds of fonts. And so I wanted to share this real quick and say, choose wisely. Again, as you are sharing you as a sender, you're sharing your ideas, you have to make sure that information is encoded properly, meaning that it's tangible. It becomes tangible to you, though it's intangible, but it becomes tangible to you, becomes a reality to you. And what's intangible has to become a reality that is communicated effectively to your customer, to your client. So though it may be intangible, down to your logo, yourself on the screen here, though it may be intangible, the encoding process, it in fact is tangible. Because you as the business owner, my job is to make that pie, that commercial, ever see a commercial where that hamburger looks so good it makes you hungry, or that piece of pie, whatever the case might be, or the vehicle. Again, it is the emotional part of your brand language that we are conveying. So that's the reason why the brand language is important. So I hope that I have been able to answer questions. What is your brand language? Or at least help you build momentum, getting the wheels spinning as far as you're creating a deeper understanding. Again, being able to communicate more effectively your brand language. And if you're not there, that's what this is about. That's what Brand Talk with Curtis is about. Helping you create, build your brand, and eventually helping you look good on camera. So as you are building your brand, again, communicating it effectively is absolutely essential. And lastly, there are a couple of software programs I wanted to share with you. One is called Canva. Again, these are awesome brand building tools that you can use to build your brand. Another is called Spark Post. I think it's part of the Adobe collection. It's called Spark Post, and they're both free applications on your iPad. And I think Canva, there is some kind of charge with it, but it's nominal, and I think that there's a part of it that's free as well. So some other attributes or parts of it you can purchase or not, but nevertheless, for the most part, I believe it's free. And again, there's Spark Post, and it's part of the Adobe collection. So once more, as you are building your brand, guys, know that it is absolutely important that you understand the communication process, know where you are at in the communication process, and recognize the different levels of communication. Meaning, again, that within the process, the same things that we've already discussed. Again, you as a sender, you are the individual who shares the idea, the encoding, okay? The communication channel, number 4, that you and I will have to choose to communicate our message. The receiver, again, the receiver is absolutely important. All components of this process, communication process, are absolutely important, and it's essential that we understand it. And if we understand the communication process, we can also understand that our brand language ties absolutely and directly into the communication process, down to the alphabet, down to the typography, down to the composition, the makeup of your logo, down to the uniforms, down to the folding of the hands, down to the attitude, down to how you're feeling that day, down to the things that you've gone through in the past. Because the things that you've gone through in the past, if they have not been rectified in some fashion, guess what? You and I will choose the colors, the alphabet, the composition of our logo according to our feelings, and then eventually we convey that message, and then we wonder why no one's responding. So again, check the level of communication, recognize, know where you're at in this process of communication, and sometimes there may be a need for rebranding. Again, recognizing there is emotional bond to your communication. It's called building a relationship. So, and the later days, or later weeks I should say, we'll be digging further into visual brand language or brand language. What is your brand language? We're going to be talking about the strategic pyramid. So the strategic pyramid is going to dig further into your brand language. So there are 4 components of that. I'll share those with you real quick. Brand personality, product attributes, design principles, and finally signature elements. Guys, I am going to wrap it up here. It has been a moment here. So that being said, guys, my name is Curtis Brooks, and this is the launching of our brand new show that is Brand Talk with Curtis. It has been an absolutely awesome time here with you. Thank you, Joe Wheeler, for being a part of the show, and whoever else was watching. I appreciate you for taking the time to be a part of this production. That being said, guys, again, my name is Curtis Brooks, and this is Brand Talk with Curtis. Thanks for being a part of our launch here with Brand Talk with Curtis. Have an awesome day. Ciao.